The rain had begun hours earlier, the kind of storm that seemed to wash the city clean, yet leave an ache behind in the air. Cars rolled past the hospital in blurred streaks of red and white, their reflections gliding across puddles on the cracked pavement. Inside the children's wing, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant, a sterile sharpness that clung to every wall. The quiet hum of machines echoed against tile floors, interrupted by the muffled voices of nurses hurrying from one room to the next. Adrian Cole was not supposed to be there. His world rarely intersected with hospital corridors. His life had been one of towering glass offices, private jets, and long boardroom tables where fortunes rose and fell in a single handshake. Yet fate had a way of placing him in places he never imagined. He had come to check on an old friend who'd been admitted after an accident, but one wrong turn down a narrow hallway pulled him toward something that would change everything. His gaze drifted across the names outside the rooms until it caught on a small window at the end of the corridor. A soft light spilled from within, flickering across the polished floor. Something tugged at him, urging him closer though he couldn't explain why. He paused outside the glass, hands tightening inside his coat pockets, prepared to glance once and move on. But then he saw her. A woman sat on the edge of a narrow hospital bed, her shoulders slightly hunched, her figure silhouetted against the pale glow of monitors. One arm was wrapped protectively around a small child lying across her lap, his face turned toward her chest, a tangle of wires and tubes tracing delicate paths across his fragile body. On the bed beside her, another boy lay curled beneath a thin blanket, chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm, the beeping of the heart monitor. Steady but unnerving, Adrian froze, his throat tightening. He knew that figure, even after all these years. Her hair was longer now, darker than he remembered. But her posture, her quiet strength, her very presence struck him with a force that stole his breath. It couldn't be her. But it was Clara. The name burst through his mind like lightning splitting a storm. 7 years had passed since she disappeared. 7 years since she had walked out of his life without a trace, leaving only silence where her laughter had once been. He had searched for her in places he never thought he'd go, through people who gave him half-truths and broken leads. Each year, the hope of finding her had dimmed until it became something he kept buried under layers of duty, wealth, and the endless cycle of power. He told himself he had moved on. That was what men like him did. But in that moment, staring at her through the glass, every buried memory clawed its way back to life. Her face was older, carved with exhaustion, yet the essence of her, the softness in her jaw, the quiet fire in her eyes remained untouched. And then his gaze shifted to the children. 2 little boys, their features fragile yet hauntingly familiar. A sharp pain tore through him as recognition sparked. Their eyes, even half closed in weariness, mirrored something he saw in his own reflection every morning. Hazel flecked with gold, the same shape, the same quiet intensity. His breath stilled, the weight of realization pressing against his chest. They weren't strangers. His fingers hovered near the door handle, his body trembling against every instinct to rush inside. Yet his feet refused to move. He was locked there, suspended between the life he had built and the truth staring back at him. The air around him seemed to vanish, replaced by the rapid hammering of his heart. Clara lifted her head then, her tired eyes scanning the window as though sensing the weight of his stare. Their gazes collided. In that single instant, the storm outside was forgotten, the hum of machines vanished, and time itself stilled. Her lips parted slightly, not in a smile, not in anger, but in something raw shock laced with fear. For a fleeting second, he saw the flicker of 1,000 memories in her eyes, the nights they had shared, the promises whispered, the pain of their parting, and then, unmistakably, guilt. Adrian's chest tightened until he could barely draw a breath. He wanted to move, to speak, to demand answers, but his body betrayed him. His hands trembled against the glass as though pressing harder might pull him through it. When Clara rose, pulling the boy in her arms closer, Adrian felt as though the ground beneath him cracked open. She held the child protectively, her posture shifting from exhaustion to defiance, as though bracing herself for a battle she had long dreaded. 7 years of silence, 7 years of questions, all crashed into him with the force of a storm he could no longer ignore. Those boys weren't just hers. Deep inside, he already knew the truth. They were his. The realization struck harder than any deal he had ever made or lost. He should have turned away, walked back down the corridor, pretended he had never seen her, never seen them, but something greater than pride, greater than fear, held him rooted in place. The rain outside battered against the glass windows, echoing the chaos inside his chest. He placed his hand gently against the hospital door, his reflection faint in its surface, and finally, with a breath that shook through his entire frame, he pushed it open. The quiet creak of the door sliced through the silence like thunder. Clara's head whipped toward him instantly, her entire body stiffening. Her voice, low and strained, broke the moment apart. Adrian. He stepped inside, and the world he thought he knew unraveled completely. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt heavier than it should have, as though the entire past had slipped into the room with him. The fluorescent light cast a pale glow over the walls, but it was Clara's presence that filled every corner, every inch of the air. She stood with her back straight now, her arms locked tightly around the small boy in her embrace, her chin lifted as though she were preparing herself for a blow she had been dreading for years. Adrian's throat tightened, the storm of words inside him clashing against silence. He wanted to speak, to demand an explanation, to ask every question that had gnawed at him for 7 endless years. Yet, when he opened his mouth, only her name came out again, softer this time, almost a plea. Clara. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. You shouldn't be here. Her voice carried no anger, only exhaustion, as if she had repeated that sentence too many times in her mind. Waiting for this very moment, Adrian glanced at the boys, one stirring weakly in her arms, the other still beneath the thin blanket. Their breaths were shallow, fragile, yet steady enough to ease his racing heart just slightly. He took a step closer before forcing himself to stop. He didn't want to frighten her more than she already was. I wasn't looking for you, he admitted, his voice rough. Not tonight. I didn't even know this was where I was going. But I saw you, and his words faltered, tangled in the storm of his emotions. Clara's lips pressed together. She adjusted the child in her arms, smoothing back a lock of his hair with trembling fingers. You need to leave, Adrian. Please, this isn't your place anymore. The words pierced deeper than any blade could. He should have obeyed, should have spared her the burden of his presence. But then his gaze fell again to the boys, and something primal, undeniable, rose inside him. He couldn't, not when the truth was written so clearly in their faces. They're mine. His voice was firm now, though the tremor of awe still lingered in it. Clara stiffened, her breath catching as though the air itself betrayed her. For a long moment, she said nothing. Only the sound of the monitors filled the silence, steady beeps counting down each second of tension. Finally, she closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered, they're yours. The ground seemed to tilt beneath Adrian, a swell of emotions crashing into him: rage at the years lost, sorrow for what she had endured alone, and an overwhelming tenderness he hadn't felt in so long it frightened him. He moved toward the empty chair near the bed and lowered himself into it, his movement slow, deliberate. Clara didn't stop him, but her body remained tense, her arms clutching the child, as though afraid he might try to take him away. What are their names? Adrian asked softly. She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the little boy in her arms, then to the one asleep beside her. Finally, she said, Daniel and Samuel. Her voice cracked slightly on the second name, but she steadied it. Adrian repeated the names under his breath, as though anchoring them to memory. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and for a long moment, he simply studied them. Their small hands, their lashes against pale cheeks, the quiet rise and fall of their chests. They look like me, he whispered. They look like themselves, Clara corrected sharply, though her tone carried more fear than defiance. Adrian's chest ached at her words, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to fight her right now. What happened? He asked gently. Why are they here? Clara's lips parted, then closed again. Her gaze dropped to Daniel's frail body in her arms, her fingers brushing over the fur line that disappeared into his small hand. Her silence spoke volumes, but at last, she whispered, "They're sick, both of them. Daniel worse than Samuel. The doctors, they don't know if." Her voice trailed off. Breaking into silence she couldn't fill, Adrian's jaw tightened. He had faced crises that would bring nations to their knees. He had stood in rooms where billions of dollars hinged on his word. But nothing, not power, not wealth, not strategy could prepare him for the helplessness that gripped him now. "Tell me what they need," he said firmly. Clara shook her head. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," he insisted, leaning closer. His voice was steady now, not as a businessman used to commanding, but as a man desperate to save what he never knew he had. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "They need a transplant. Their bodies aren't responding to the treatments anymore. The doctors are running out of options." Adrian's breath caught. His gaze darted between the boys, his mind racing, calculating possibilities. "A transplant," he echoed. "Then we'll find one. I'll do whatever it takes. Money isn't it's not about money." Clara cut in, her voice sharper now, cracking under the weight she carried. She rocked Daniel slightly, as if soothing herself as much as him. "It's about time. It's about finding a match. And you can't just buy that, Adrian." Her words silenced him, but deep inside, a seed of determination was already taking root. For years, he had believed his life was about empire and power, about carving his name into the world so it could never be erased. But here, in this quiet hospital room, staring at two fragile lives he hadn't known were his, Adrian realized something else. This was his true legacy. Not wealth, not skyscrapers, not contracts inked in gold. Family. His children. The thought was both terrifying and electrifying. He felt something stir inside him, a strength he hadn't known he still possessed, a fire that burned not for ambition, but for love. Clara shifted, her eyes wary as they met his. "You can't just walk back in and act like nothing happened. You weren't there, Adrian. You weren't here for the nights I thought they wouldn't wake up. You didn't sit in this chair praying for miracles. You weren't." Her voice broke, but she caught it quickly, clutching Daniel closer. Adrian swallowed hard, guilt weighing heavy in his chest. He hadn't been there. He had lost those years, stolen by silence and secrets. But sitting here now, he knew one thing. With absolute certainty, he wouldn't lose another. He leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. "I wasn't there, Clara, and I can't change that. But I'm here now, and I swear to you, I won't walk away again." Clara stared at him, her expression torn between disbelief and longing. For the first time since he had entered, she didn't look like she wanted to run. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, something had shifted. The silence was no longer empty. It was waiting for what came next. Adrian sat back, his eyes locked on his son's, determination burning through the doubt. He didn't know how, he didn't know what it would take. But one truth rang louder than the storm outside. He would fight for them, even if it meant tearing apart the world he had built, stone by stone. The quiet hum of the monitors was broken, only by the soft rustle of blankets as Daniel stirred, his small body trembling under Clara's careful hold. Adrian leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with unspoken fears and anticipation. Every second stretched, each beep of the machine echoing like a countdown. The doctor stepped in, her face a mask of professional composure, but Adrian could see the subtle tension in her eyes. She carried a clipboard, papers rustling like whispers. Of fate, Clara straightened, still holding Daniel, as if her arms could shield him from the weight of the world. Adrian remained standing, his gaze fixed on the children, his mind already racing, planning, calculating. "Mr. Lawson," the doctor began, her tone careful, almost gentle. "We've reviewed all possible options, and Daniel's condition, it's critical. His immune system isn't responding to the current treatments. We recommend preparing for an urgent stem cell transplant. The clock is against us." Adrian felt a sharp jolt, like ice water rushing into his veins. "Stem cell transplant?" His voice was steadier than he felt. "What's the chance? What does he need exactly?" Clara's hand tightened on Daniel, her body rigid. "Doctor, please, be honest. The doctor glanced between them, her eyes lingering on Adrian as though gauging how much he could bear. "We need a compatible donor as soon as possible. Without it, the prognosis is grave. It's time-sensitive, and we have to act fast. We can start the procedure, but the success depends on several factors, and time is one of them." Adrian's jaw clenched. He had faced impossible odds before. Boardrooms stacked against him, entire companies on the brink. But nothing prepared him for this, the helplessness of watching life hang in the balance, unable to force it into his control. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so Clara could hear. "We'll find a donor. I'll do whatever it takes. No limit, no expense." Clara's gaze flickered to him, doubt and fear mingling in her eyes. "It's not that simple. Daniel's condition is delicate. He could react badly. The risk is huge." Adrian shook his head. "Then we take the risk. I won't sit by and do nothing. Not this time." His voice hardened, a steel edge sharpening with resolve. "He's my son. Both of them are. I will not fail them." The doctor hesitated, as if weighing his words. Before nodding slowly, "We'll begin preparations immediately. We'll need tests, donor matches, and consent forms. It's a race against time." Clara's breath hitched, tears welling but not falling. Adrian reached out, a tentative hand brushing against hers. "We'll do this together. I promise." For the first time in years, the weight of the past, the silent years of separation, the unanswered questions, the loss felt like fuel rather than burden. It propelled him forward. He could rebuild the years lost, not with words, but with action. The hospital corridor outside was quiet, yet Adrian felt the urgency in every heartbeat, every passing second. He made a decision, then he would leave nothing to chance. He called upon specialists, tapped into networks that reached beyond borders, made calls to stem cell banks and private donors. Every second mattered, and Adrian moved with relentless precision. Clara watched him, her apprehension gradually giving way to a flicker of hope. She had survived alone this long, had borne the fear, the nights spent awake, listening to Daniel and Samuel's shallow breaths. But now, she wasn't alone. As the hours passed, Adrian remained by the children's side, learning everything he could about their condition. He studied charts, lab results, medical journals, absorbing every detail as though it were a weapon against the illness threatening their lives. His world had narrowed to these two fragile forms before him, and nothing else mattered. Not the boardroom, not wealth, not power, only them. At one point, Daniel stirred, his tiny hand curling around Adrian's finger with a surprising strength. Adrian felt a spark of connection that went deeper than blood, deeper than time lost. It was a moment of grounding, a reminder that they were still here, still fighting, still capable of hope. Clara's eyes softened as she watched him interact with the boy. She had feared Adrian's return might disrupt the fragile balance she had maintained, but she saw now that he was becoming part of their life, not as a visitor, not as a shadow from the past, but as a force of protection, determination, and love. The night fell, dark and stormy, mirroring the turmoil in Adrian's mind. He sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass, each drop a reminder of the urgency outside and the fragility within. Yet even as doubt whispered, he refused to yield. He would not allow despair to claim them. He made plans with the doctors, coordinated with specialists, and set in motion a chain of events that could save Daniel. Each step was precise, deliberate, and fueled by a fierce love that had lain dormant for too long. He realized that life was not about controlling the uncontrollable, it was about choosing to fight. When the odds seemed insurmountable, hours melted into each other. Adrian slept little, moving between the hospital room and calls to ensure every avenue was explored. Clara followed him closely, guiding him through the delicate care of the children, her trust in him growing with each passing moment. The bond that had once been fractured was beginning to rebuild, brick by brick, through shared fear, shared hope, and shared determination. Late into the night, Adrian sat with Daniel, softly stroking his hair, whispering words of reassurance. Samuel slept beside Clara, but Adrian could see the boy's chest rise and fall, fragile yet steady. In the quiet moments, he imagined a future one where these children thrived, where the pain and silence of the past were replaced by laughter and security. For the first time, he felt the weight of being a father, not as a distant figure, but as a protector, a guide, a fighter. It was terrifying, exhausting, and infinitely beautiful. Adrian looked at Clara and the children, his heart swelling with determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would move heaven and earth to save them. No obstacle would be too great, no challenge too formidable. For Daniel and Samuel, he would become everything they needed him to be: their father, their shield, their hope. As the rain continued to pound against the hospital windows, Adrian whispered a vow he intended to keep. "I will not fail you, not now, not ever." And in that promise, the first glimmer of a miracle had already begun. Adrian barely noticed the dim glow of dawn breaking through the hospital blinds. The world outside continued, oblivious to the quiet war being waged inside room 3C. He had spent the night making calls, contacting specialists, arranging for genetic tests, and coordinating with international stem cell banks. Every lead was pursued, every possibility examined, every detail scrutinized. Time was both his enemy and his motivator, and he refused to squander a single second. Clara hovered nearby, her hands busy adjusting monitors and checking lines, her eyes betraying exhaustion, worry, and a fragile hope. Daniel had been restless through the night, shifting under her gentle touch, murmuring faintly. Adrian watched, heart clenched, as the boy's tiny fingers sought comfort in Clara's hand. The bond between mother and children was unbreakable, but he realized that a father's presence now carried a weight of its own, one that could protect, reassure, and fight fiercely when words and machines failed. The doctor returned, a folder of results in hand. Adrian and Clara both leaned in, holding their collective breath. "We've identified a potential donor," she said cautiously. "The match isn't perfect, but it's the closest we've found globally. If we move fast, we can begin preparations within 48 hours. But the procedure is intensive. Complications are possible, and we have to be prepared for every outcome." Adrian's chest tightened. Imperfections, risks, uncertainty, they were all present, yet he refused to retreat. "We do it," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." No hesitation. Clara hesitated, looking at Daniel's fragile form, then back at Adrian. "Are you sure?" she whispered, fear threading her words. "This could go wrong. We could lose him." Adrian reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "We're already standing at the edge of the cliff," he said quietly, his voice unwavering. "The only choice now is to leap, and I refuse to let fear hold us back." The hospital moved into controlled chaos as preparations began. Adrian's world narrowed to a singular focus: saving Daniel. He sat beside the boy, reading his charts, learning everything about the procedure, memorizing every precaution. He spoke softly to Daniel as if the words themselves could fortify his body. "You're strong, little one," he murmured. "We're going to get through this. I promise. I'll be right here every step." Clara watched the exchange, emotions tangled: relief, worry, admiration. She had spent years shielding these boys from uncertainty, but now she realized that, with Adrian's return, they had a protector who refused to be defeated. The unity forming between them, fragile, tentative, yet undeniable, brought a glimmer of hope in the otherwise sterile and tense atmosphere. The hours dragged on. Adrian coordinated with teams in different countries, ensuring the donor could be prepared and transported safely. He spoke to lab technicians, physicians, and specialists as though orchestrating a symphony, each move critical, each note essential. He was relentless, consumed, focused, refusing to let distractions or doubts seep in. Finally, the call came. The donor was ready, cells harvested and prepared for transport. Adrian and Clara were ushered into a private waiting area, the gravity of the moment pressing down on them. "It's happening," Adrian whispered, gripping Clara's hand. "It's really happening." Clara nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, but she forced a steadying breath. "He has to make it. He has to." Meanwhile, in room 3C, Daniel and Samuel rested, fragile and unaware of the intricate network of plans being executed to save their lives. Adrian watched them with a mix of reverence and urgency. These two tiny forms, innocent and vulnerable, held a power over him he had never imagined: the power to push him beyond fear, beyond fatigue, beyond any limitations he had ever known. As the team prepared Daniel for the transplant, Adrian was allowed to stay at his bedside, holding his hand, whispering words of reassurance. "I'm here, Daniel. We're doing this together. You're going to be stronger than ever. I promise. We're going to get through this." The procedure began, and Adrian sat in the waiting room for hours, heart hammering, mind racing. Each update from the doctor sent ripples through him, a pendulum swinging between hope and anxiety. Clara sat beside him, silent but unwavering, her presence a quiet anchor amidst the storm. Minutes stretched into hours. Adrian replayed memories in his mind: first steps, laughter, bedtime stories, and even the moments of fear and uncertainty they had endured. Each recollection reinforced his resolve. He would not allow this darkness to define their lives. Finally, the doctor emerged, exhaustion evident on her face, but a subtle smile breaking through. "The procedure was completed," she said cautiously. "We'll need to monitor closely, but the initial response is promising. His body is beginning to accept the transplant." Adrian exhaled, relief washing over him in a tidal wave. He rose, moving to Clara's side, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We did it," he whispered. "He's going to make it. He's going to be okay." Clara's tears fell freely now, and Adrian held her as though he could absorb her fears. Outside the hospital, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a calm, wet world. Inside, hope had taken root, fragile but real, promising a future where fear could be replaced with possibility. Adrian returned to Daniel's bedside, watching the monitors, reading the subtle signs of progress. He spoke softly, words of encouragement, flowing naturally. "You're a fighter, Daniel. You've always been a fighter. And we're here to fight with you, every step, through the long night, the quiet strength of family." Resolve and love held firm. Adrian realized something profound. True power was not in wealth, influence, or status. It was in the relentless determination to protect and cherish those you love, even when the world seemed determined to challenge you. By dawn, Daniel's breathing was steadier, his tiny chest rising and falling with more rhythm, more strength. Adrian, exhausted but vigilant, sat beside him, the weight of relief settling in his bones. Clara slept lightly in the chair beside the bed, her hands still resting gently on Samuel. The battle was not over. The road to recovery would be long and fraught with challenges, but a crucial step had been won. Adrian knew there would be moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion ahead, but he was ready. For the first time in years, the past felt like a shadow behind him, and the future stretched wide, illuminated by the fragile, unwavering light of hope. As the morning sun filtered through the blinds, Adrian whispered a vow to himself, to Clara, and to the children. "No matter what comes next, we face it together. I will never let anything take you from me." And in that promise, the first rays of a new beginning had begun to shine. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional shuffle of nurses checking vitals. Adrian sat beside Daniel, holding his tiny hand in both of his, as though his presence alone could anchor the boy's fragile body. The relief from the successful transplant had not yet given way to comfort. The battle had been won, but the war for recovery had only just begun. Each shallow breath Daniel took felt like a small victory, and Adrian couldn't stop himself from whispering encouragements, as though the boy could hear and understand the gravity of the words. Clara hovered near the bed, exhausted but alert, her hands perpetually smoothing the blankets or adjusting tubes, as if any small gesture could ward off danger. Her eyes met Adrian's often, and in those glances passed unspoken gratitude, relief, and a fragile sense of trust that had been forged through the unlikeliest of circumstances. 7 years of absence, 7 years of unanswered questions, and now they were thrust together into this delicate equilibrium. The first week was a haze of hospital routines, medication schedules, and constant monitoring. Daniel's small body had already endured more than most adults could comprehend, yet he displayed a resilience that astounded Adrian. Every minor improvement, a steadier heartbeat, a stronger cry, a fluttering smile felt like a miracle. Adrian documented everything meticulously, noting trends, making plans, and coordinating with specialists. He was no longer just a visitor or a bystander. He had become a guardian, a strategist, a constant presence whose life had been realigned around these two fragile forms. Samuel, ever observant, watched Adrian with a mixture of curiosity and cautious trust. He was more aware than Daniel, and Adrian could sense the silent questions in his eyes. Are you really here to stay? Will you protect us? Adrian knelt beside him one evening, gently lifting the boy into his lap. I promise, he said, softly, voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion inside him. I will always be here for you. I will not leave. You have me now, always. Samuel's tiny fingers gripped Adrian's coat, and for the first time since their reunion, Adrian felt a true, tangible connection, one that went beyond words or explanations. Days blurred into nights, and the hospital became a microcosm of their lives. Adrian learned to navigate the routines with Clara, finding a rhythm that allowed them to balance care, emotion, and practical necessity. They shared quiet moments, coffee in the small cafeteria, hushed conversations in empty corridors, and the rare laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Through it all, the children remained the central gravity, their needs, vulnerabilities, and small joys shaping every decision. Adrian also began to confront the emotional scars that the past had left on him. Seeing Isabel Clara now, after the legal name change and the boys, he was forced to wrestle with guilt, regret, and unanswered questions. He remembered the nights spent searching for her, the sleepless weeks filled with confusion and anger, and the void of her absence. Now, faced with the tangible results of those lost years, he realized that healing would require more than actions. It would require forgiveness, understanding, and a willingness to rebuild trust brick by brick. Clara, too, faced her own battles. Protecting her children for all those years had required secrecy, careful planning, and emotional fortitude. But letting Adrian into their lives again meant opening herself to vulnerability. Each shared glance, each cooperative effort, each brief smile exchanged in the hospital halls became a subtle negotiation of trust. Slowly, imperceptibly, the walls she had built began to soften, replaced by cautious hope. One evening, Adrian found a quiet moment in the hospital garden. The rain had stopped, and the scent of wet earth mingled with the antiseptic air of the building. He took a deep breath, reflecting on the trajectory of their lives, the pain, the separation, the silent suffering, and now this fragile opportunity for unity. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering golden light across the courtyard, and he felt a surge of determination. This was not just about surviving. It was about reclaiming the years lost and forging something stronger, deeper, and lasting. Back in the room, Daniel stirred, his small eyes opening to see Adrian beside him. A smile flickered on the boy's face, faint but real. Adrian leaned closer. See, you're stronger than ever. You're doing this, Daniel. You're fighting, and you're winning. Samuel, who had been sleeping on a small cot nearby, woke and crawled to the edge of Daniel's bed. Papa, he asked softly, the word carrying a weight of trust and hope. Adrian's heart clenched at the sound. Yes, my boy, he replied, voice gentle but steady. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. The following weeks were a mixture of triumph and tension. Daniel responded well to treatment, but complications and minor setbacks reminded them all of the fragility of life. Adrian remained a constant presence, coordinating care, learning medical nuances, and providing emotional support. He realized that strength was not measured by wealth, influence, or control. It was measured by persistence, patience, and unwavering dedication in the face of uncertainty. Slowly, the family began to envision a life beyond the hospital walls. Plans were made for home care, schooling, and routines that would allow Daniel and Samuel to regain a sense of normalcy. Adrian and Clara found moments of quiet intimacy, shared responsibilities, and the tentative joy of rebuilding a family fractured by time and circumstance. Every day brought small victories, a laugh, a step taken without fear, a night slept peacefully. Each was celebrated as though it were monumental, and in those moments, the scars of the past softened, replaced by the luminous potential of the future. Adrian often found himself reflecting on the lessons learned through this journey. Life was unpredictable, fragile, and often cruel, but within that fragility existed the potential for extraordinary resilience, love, and transformation. The children, with their innocence, bravery, and trust, had taught him more about courage and devotion than any business venture or worldly achievement ever could. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Adrian held both boys close. "We've been through a lot," he murmured, "but we're together now. That's what matters, and no matter what comes next, we face it as a family, always." Clara, standing nearby, nodded, tears of relief and hope glistening on her cheeks. "Always," she echoed softly. In that quiet moment, surrounded by fragile monitors and soft sunlight, Adrian understood the magnitude of the journey ahead. Healing was ongoing, relationships required nurturing, and life remained unpredictable. Yet for the first time in years, he felt an unshakable certainty. Together, they could face anything. The past had shaped them, but it would not define them. Love, resilience, and hope would. Outside, the city continued its ceaseless rhythm, oblivious to the quiet triumphs taking place in a small hospital room. But inside, amidst the quiet beeping of machines and the fragile breath of two children, a family was being reborn, stronger, wiser, and prepared to embrace a future forged through struggle, courage, and unbreakable bonds. And in the stillness of that evening, as the world outside darkened and the boys slept peacefully, Adrian silently vowed to himself, no matter what storms came, no matter how fierce, no matter how long the nights, he would protect them, guide them, and cherish every heartbeat. For in their survival, he had found purpose, redemption, and a love that could never be erased. The sun had just begun its ascent, spilling pale gold through the tall hospital windows. The quiet hum of machines and soft murmur of nurses filled the corridors, but in room 3C, time seemed suspended. Adrian sat beside Daniel, brushing a stray lock of hair from his son's forehead. The boy stirred, opening hazel eyes that mirrored his father's own. A smile, tentative but genuine, broke across Daniel's face. It was a small gesture, but to Adrian, it felt like the first rays of hope after a long, unending storm. Clara sat nearby, holding Samuel on her lap. The boy yawned and leaned against her shoulder, trusting, sleepy, and completely at ease. In this moment, the weight of past misunderstandings, years of separation, and unspoken fears seemed to dissolve. They had fought for this through absence, through pain, through nights that felt endless and uncertain. And now they were here, together, a fragile but unbroken family. Adrian allowed himself to take a deep breath, feeling the tension in his shoulders loosen. For the first time in years, he reflected on how far they had come. The initial shock of seeing Clara again, the revelation of their son's existence, and the relentless battle to save Daniel's life. Every step had tested him, pushed him, and reshaped him. He realized that life's greatest lessons were rarely learned in comfort. They were forged in moments of fear, uncertainty, and unwavering commitment. Clara's eyes met his across the room. For a moment, words were unnecessary. They had both endured so much pain, loss, absence, fear, but standing here in this quiet, unassuming hospital room, there was a shared understanding, a silent agreement to move forward together. Trust, fragile yet growing, had been rebuilt piece by piece. She gave him a small, tentative smile, and Adrian responded in kind. Feeling the warmth of hope blossom inside him, Daniel coughed lightly, and Adrian instinctively adjusted the blankets around him. "Feeling stronger today, little fighter?" he asked softly. The boy nodded, his grip on Adrian's hand tightening. "Papa," he whispered, and the word hit Adrian like a wave, carrying weight, meaning, and the full depth of their shared journey. He bent down, pressing a gentle kiss to Daniel's forehead. "Yes, my son, I am right here, always." Over the next few days, progress continued. Daniel responded well to treatment, his strength gradually returning. Samuel's laughter, once rare and cautious, began to fill the room, a bright, melodic contrast to the previous tension. Clara watched them with a mixture of relief and wonder, realizing that despite the scars of the past, they were carving a new path, one built on love, resilience, and the promise of a future together. Adrian found himself reflecting on his own transformation. He had been a man of ambition, defined by status and achievement, yet it had taken the vulnerability of caring for these children to truly understand what mattered. Wealth, influence, and success were hollow without connection, compassion, and purpose. Here, amidst the fragility of life and the triumph of recovery, he had discovered a deeper meaning, the unwavering commitment to protect, nurture, and love those who mattered most. One evening, after Daniel had drifted into a peaceful sleep, Adrian and Clara sat quietly by the window. The city outside was alive with distant noise, but inside, there was a serene calm. Clara reached for Adrian's hand, intertwining their fingers. "We've been through so much," she said softly. "I never imagined we'd find our way here." Adrian squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and determination. "We did, against all odds, and now we move forward together." Plans for life beyond the hospital began to take shape. A home was prepared, filled with warmth, laughter, and the safety of family. Doctors provided guidance, ensuring Daniel's continued recovery, and Samuel adjusted to routines that offered both stability and freedom. Every milestone, from a confident step to a carefree laugh, became a celebration, a testament to resilience, love, and the indomitable human spirit. Adrian also made efforts to mend the emotional gaps of the past. He shared stories with the boys of their mother's bravery, their father's unwavering love, and the incredible journey that had brought them together. They learned not just about survival, but about the power of hope, trust, and enduring family bonds. Clara, too, embraced a renewed sense of partnership, recognizing that Adrian's commitment was genuine, consistent, and unshakable. As the weeks passed, Daniel regained energy and vitality. He played with Samuel, laughed freely, and embraced life with an innocence and courage that inspired everyone around him. Adrian and Clara observed these moments with profound gratitude, understanding that they had not only survived, but had created a foundation of love and security that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. One late afternoon, Adrian took the boys to the hospital courtyard. The sun bathed the space in golden light, illuminating the joy on their faces as they ran, played, and laughed. Clara watched, tears of happiness and relief glistening in her eyes. Adrian knelt beside her, his voice low but filled with emotion. "Look at them," he said. "They've survived everything life threw at them, and they're stronger for it. And so are we." Clara nodded, leaning into him. "Yes," she whispered, "stronger, together, and ready for whatever comes next." In the quiet moments that followed, Adrian felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The pain of the past, the struggles, the nights of uncertainty, all of it had led to this, a family united, resilient, and filled with hope. He realized that life's most extraordinary victories often emerged not from wealth, power, or recognition, but from love, courage, and the willingness to never give up. Evenings became a time of storytelling, laughter, and gentle reflection. Adrian shared tales of his own childhood, of lessons learned, and of the mistakes that had shaped him. Clara added her own stories, emphasizing resilience, compassion, and the strength of love. The boys listened intently, absorbing values, hope, and the unwavering belief that, no matter what, they were never alone. Months passed, and Daniel's health stabilized. He returned home, carrying not just physical strength, but a renewed zest for life. Samuel, thriving alongside him, reveled in the joy of a secure, loving environment. Adrian and Clara continued to navigate parenthood together, growing as partners and as a family. Their home, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now radiated warmth, laughter, and the quiet confidence of shared resilience. One evening, Adrian sat by the fireplace, Daniel asleep on the couch beside him, and Samuel resting in Clara's lap. He reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the pain, the separation, the moments of despair, and the incredible triumphs. Life had tested them in ways they could never have anticipated, but through love, trust, and determination, they had emerged stronger, united, and hopeful. Looking at Clara and the boys, Adrian realized that their story was not just one of survival, but of transformation. They had been given a second chance not just at life, but at love, family, and purpose. And he knew, with unwavering certainty, that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together as a family bound by resilience, hope, and unbreakable bonds. As night fell, the soft glow of the room reflected the peace that had been earned through struggle. Adrian whispered softly to himself and to the sleeping children, "We made it. Together, we are unstoppable. Together, we are home." In that quiet affirmation, he found not just closure, but the promise of endless possibilities, the power of love's endurance, and the unshakable truth that even the darkest storms could give way to a sunrise of hope, healing, and new beginnings. The story of their journey of absence, fear, love, and triumph was a testament to the human spirit. And as the family slept, wrapped in warmth and security, the world outside continued in its chaos, unaware that within this quiet home, a story of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of love had reached its unforgettable conclusion.